everyone, and welcome to today's Zoom event produced by the Intel Alumni Network in conjunction with our friends at Intel. My name is James Cape, and I'm the current president of the Intel Alumni Network. Before we get started, a bit of housekeeping. As we always say every time, please, guys, please, use the Q&A window for questions that you want to ask either the moderator or the panelists. If you want to chat with your friends, it's totally cool. Just use the chat function, please, at the bottom of your screen. The reason why is that I'm the one that's curating all the questions. And if I get lots of funny, entertaining comments coming across the Q&A window, I'm not concentrating on curating questions for Dan. Now on to today's event, which is the third in a series of AI-focused events that we have been producing quarterly for about 9 months. But before we start, please note the disclaimer provided by Intel. If you can move to that slide, Michael. And more simply put, just please understand, any statements or opinions expressed by the panelists or the moderator are solely their own. Now, without further delay, let's get started. Today's topic will focus on how to build a sustainable competitive advantage utilizing these AI tools. The panel discussion will be moderated by Dan Feinberg, fellow Intel alum, co-founder of the Fusion Syndicate, and current board member of the Intel Alumni Network. Dan, you have the floor.
Well, thanks very much, James. I'm really happy to introduce 3 esteemed panelists today. First, Maddie Neustadt is a fellow Intel alum and an international digital transformation lawyer. She founded Forsti Cyberkinetics to focus on empowering clients to build resilient strategies in quickly evolving legal landscapes. Her corporate counsel experience includes key positions at DNV, NetApp, Motorola Solutions, Microsoft, and Micron. She holds a bachelor's in applied physics from Purdue, a JD from Lewis and Clark Law School, and 2 patents. In 2021, she was recognized as one of Silicon Valley's top 100 women of influence and also as Innovator of the Year for in-house legal practice. Reddy Malady, another fellow Intel alum, is well known as a dynamic and forward-thinking executive driving transformative change with AI, operational excellence, and customer experience. He is currently partner and chief operating officer at 7 Train Ventures. Before that, at Autodesk, he was VP Operations and Digital Transformation. At ADP, he was a business unit chief operating officer and VP and GM for 2 service businesses. His new book is called AI Unleashed, a leader's playbook to harness the power for AI for business excellence. Dr. Priyanka Dobriyal is a highly accomplished semiconductor industry professional focused on AI technology and its potential for improving the lives of billions around the world. She is a product development engineer with the Data Center AI division at Intel, and she is founder of Access AI, which she will tell you about. Priyanka holds a master's degree in chemistry from the Indian Institute of Technology and a PhD in polymer physics from the University of Massachusetts. She has 8 patents and was recognized as the Society of Women Engineers Emerging Leader of 2021. So I'm so honored to moderate this wonderful panel, and I want to throw it out to you. Maddie, why don't you start and tell us about your topic?
Thanks, Dan. And thanks for having me as part of this group. I feel a little overshadowed by Priyanka and Reddy's bona fides there, but great to be a part of this. Like Dan said, I am here because I've done a lot of advising in technology and digital legal compliance space, and the AI regulatory landscape is quickly evolving. I'm going to add to the earlier disclaimer a little bit too. Not only is it my opinion, but it's not legal advice. If you'd like legal advice, reach out, but this does not constitute legal advice. We're just going to give you a little bit of an overview as to what the legal landscape looks like. And we have that in a variety of ways. We have AI-specific legislation that is either enacted or coming down the pipeline really quickly. We have product liability laws that are being tweaked to make them applicable to various types of AI usage. There's a variety of machine and product regulation that exist as part of the safety and security of digital supply chains in machinery, operational technology, heavy industry that are coming into play. And then we have a variety of global fair practice laws that are also being updated to address AI and AI legal risks. And I think the best way to sum this up is that somebody recently asked me, you work a lot in AI. Are you scared of it or are you excited about it? And the honest answer is I'm super excited about the tools that are coming up and the democratization of this type of technology. And Priyanka is going to talk about how that democratization can really be made use of. But I'm also terrified of how it might be used, because we have the technology itself and then we have how people use it. The technology is just a tool. Humans are humans. Some people will use it for good, some people will use it for bad. A lot of this regulation is about making sure that the tools cannot be used for bad purposes, based on what the legislatures around the world define as bad. The EU AI Act has prohibited certain AI systems, including things that exploit vulnerable populations, that attempt to predict criminal risk and like pre-arrest potential criminals, a la some science fiction movie, the name of which I forget, from the 80s. And otherwise, reduce the risk that an AI tool will be put to societal harm. Now, a lot of times they put the onus on this on the people who are developing the AI rather than the users. So that gets to be a little more complicated. And that's why we look at ways to, or at least I look at ways to advise clients on how you build these things from the ground up to reduce the risk that they can be used by humans in a way that violates the law. So we have a variety of things coming through. The EU AI Act is passed and will be effective starting as soon as 5 months from now. The Colorado AI Act is the first in the nation in the United States. Similar to the privacy laws that we've seen in the US, this is likely going to be a state-by-state implementation of regulation and legislation because of, well, it's election year, and if you've been paying attention, federal Congress, hard to get coordinated right now, to say it politely. But Colorado's got some interesting stuff going on. It has a very broad definition of AI. It purports to be focused on high-risk AI systems, but that's not the same definition of high-risk AI systems that the EU uses. Colorado uses a definition that's basically any system that, when deployed, makes or is a substantial factor in making a quote-unquote consequential decision. So this could just impact a whole number of AI systems, whether they're generative or not generative. And it's designed to protect against algorithmic discrimination on protected classes and protected factors. But there's a lot of questions that are being proposed even after it was adopted and signed by the governor. So we expect it to be modified before it takes place, but it takes effect. But it does take effect, if not modified, in, I believe, February 2026. So that gets us to the timelines. And if you go to the next slide, we've got an idea of what some of the timelines look like. And I've put up some past timelines here to give you an idea of what the timelines look like for global privacy laws, primarily the GDPR in Europe, the General Data Protection Regulation, and the CCPA, the California Consumer Privacy Act. Those are the two largest privacy laws that are in the world today that have the broadest scope. And so if you look at everything in black is privacy law related. And that gives you a 3-year time frame of all of the privacy laws that have been enacted and had to be complied with in the last 4 years. Everything in pink is new, and not just new privacy law, but new digital law, new digital marketing law, new cybersecurity law, new AI law, all of these laws that are impacting AI directly and AI indirectly. And so we're seeing a much broader legal landscape that is being put in place as all of these solutions are becoming more and more accessible and more driving the digital economy of the world. So the goal then is, of course, how do we start and how do we build? this level of regulation, and particularly the level of compliance necessary to get to compliance with these legal regulations, is now being built in at a code and strategy level. So if you don't start planning for it and you just figure you'll fix it later with a contract or a notice on your website, you might be in for a rude awakening by the time you get to the point where you have a regulatory legal compliance obligation, particularly if you're inventing, working with, or launching products that are subject to certification. The EU AI Act will have a certification regime built in. So you'll need something like a CE mark to be certified to sell in Europe. And if you don't start planning now, that's a really difficult thing to reverse engineer. It's kind of what I like to call legal debt. So anybody who's gone through a technical project or an integration with an M&A activity, you can obtain and take on technical debt, things that you have to cost more to fix later. You may have to break things down, re-release, do whole new versioning. You build up this technical debt, and it costs a lot to fix it. So now you're coming up with these legal debt, and it could cost a lot now to fix because you have to implement technical implementations to comply with legal requirements. So mostly I like to terrify people and then tell them, don't worry, you have a little bit of time to think about it. But instead, make sure you stay optimistic, but also recognize that you have this legal debt that you can incur over time, and start addressing it at a baseline process. And now to talk about the great things that can happen with AI and how this is going to benefit us all as we deal with the technical and legal debt, I'm going to turn it over to Reddy.
Thank you, Maddie. Can you guys hear me okay?
Absolutely.
So I was in graduate school 30 plus years ago, and I took this neural networks class. This was in computer science graduate school. And my friend Ben and myself, we got really excited, and we wrote a game to understand the addictive behaviors of smokers. And we thought, oh, wow, okay, now AI, this is possible. This is neural networks and Lisp programming. But now 30 plus years later, what I'm seeing with the AI, it blows my mind. We had seen technology waves before. PC was one, internet is another one, mobile is another one. Each had very significant impacts on the society in a particular area. The difference with AI is it is not a wave. Just like the Industrial Revolution a couple of 100 years ago, AI touches every function, every aspect of our lives. Previous waves touched one or two aspects, like cloud. You're moving from a server to or mainframes to the cloud, or internet drove a lot of data and applications that came about an ecosystem with the mobile phones. But AI, it will touch every business function, finance, operations, sales and marketing, HR, and every aspect of the humans, organizational cultures, ways of working, because we need to be symbiotically working with AI being there. And even the leadership is going to be very different. And business models. Companies do business through channels a lot of times, and that's going to be different. With super personalization, hyper personalization happening, companies would be able to reach it directly and speak to consumers very directly in unforeseen ways. When a technology touching every aspect of it like that, governance, as Maddie was talking about, ethics and governance become very important. Change management is going to be completely different the way it was during the digital transformation versus AI. It's going to be very, 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 very different. This is why the magnitude, McKinsey and other companies have said, oh, $14 trillion. We haven't seen that kind of a GDP growth in our lifetimes. Michael, can you go to the next page? Yes. So how do you get the AI right? In my upcoming book that Dan kindly mentioned, AI Unleashed, it's coming out in about 5 weeks or so. I have a 6-step framework. I don't have time to discuss every one of them, but briefly, you make sure that you scan every organization and business functions to make sure that you identify and categorize the opportunities in the AI. Secondly, you make sure that the AI is aligned with companies' long-term strategies. AI should not be seen as it's a CIO or CTO's job. That's very, very short-sighted. It needs to be every leader's responsibility, every employee's responsibility. In order to do the AI right, the third thing is making sure that the foundations are rightly done. That means data quality, model training, computing infrastructure, security, building the right AI teams. And you want to, before you embark on a large AI production level across the company, you want to make sure that you launch a few pilots and learn from them, establish the BKMs, and spread it across the company. And then you will be able to reap the benefits of AI. Now, I talked about how AI is touching on the human side, and I pass on the mic to Priyanka to explore more on that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here. Thank you, Reddy and Matty, for your valuable insights. And I was going to just continue what Reddy was saying, that AI is touching various aspects of your company, your business processes. And I was listening to a lecture and it said that AI is very pervasive. It's like electricity. It is going to touch all the aspects of human life. And if, unlike other technologies, which have like, I have a cell phone and then you don't, and then it doesn't affect that much. But this is like, if I do something, it is going to affect you. So it is more pervasive in that sense. And then unlike in the past, when you have seen the rise and also the fall of AI, like, AI and the news about it, this time it doesn't seem to be going away. Because you see, with the revolution in GenAI, and it has already shown its value in your business processes to be able to generate codes, from chatbots. I was recently taking a class, and it was no code AI, and as the name suggests, we actually analyze a lot of data in big Excel spreadsheet, converted to CSVs, and then being able to generate the codes from chatbots and able to put it in like beautiful plots, which were able to give us really good insights about the data that was like, in these long list of line items in these CSV files. So this is really great. So as I see, and this triangle on the left is completely made by me, as per my observation of how do I see this, this whole generation with AI knowledge. So there is the top part of the plot, like, this triangle, where I'm saying it is AI specialists and experts. These are the people in academia who are actually doing research, innovations, getting ahead. Then there are industry professionals like in Intel, they are working on technology, hardware, software, coming up with all these great technologies that can be implemented, can be sold, and can be reached to the general public. And then there are students like me and many of us who are actually learning this actively, keeping track of what academics, research, innovation in industry, what is going on, and then trying to learn that, trying to integrate that in our work and see how we can get ahead. But then there is also a part of the society, which is in the bottom of the triangle, where there are more users. They are not contributing as much to the technology, but they are more like user getting instant gratification from like making an avatar from the one of these AI app or making some video. And then there is also a set of people who are living in a fear that it might take away their jobs. And they probably do not have access to what they need to upskill on or the tools that they need to work on to make sure that they can leverage this technology. And that's where a, a, a servant leadership comes, that as you move with the speed of light on the top part of the triangle, and if you don't take care of this bottom part of the triangle, the separation will become large. And the way it is going right now and getting into like, all the business function, it is going to be very detrimental, right? Because if the technology and Gen AI and all these things are going to keep evolving, you're also going to need a workforce that will make your idea into reality. And that workforce is actually coming from the bottom part of the triangle, right? If you don't have people who are informed and skilled enough, then they are going to be sitting behind the data. You're not going to fight with the machine for doing an unethical output, right? So these are the people who are sitting behind the data, missing that 1 or 2 line items in the data that were going to cause some kind of bias. And you will end up with like, legal debt and technical debt that Matty also talked about. So the key point is that as we continue moving ahead, there is also a responsibility of ourselves. And I'll tell you how it also benefits us by doing that, to also elevate the others and adopt a servant leadership kind of mindset. And you probably have heard of traditional leadership. It is more like command and control. In the servant leadership, the leader actually elevate others and the people working for them. And then it works, it has shown that it has worked much better. So upskilling everybody and making sure that you are not just getting ahead yourself, but also taking everybody with you and not leaving anybody behind is very important. And this is one of the example. You can also do that, maybe not at the level that I'm just starting it. But anybody who is a student and a learner can also do some kind of volunteering and or educate people around them and make that little change that they can, motivate somebody to actually take a step back, study, and upskill themselves in AI so that when they are raising a voice, they are giving a reasoning, it is backed by the data. We are all data driven, right? And those are the points that are heard and taken action usually if they are backed by data. So I started this Access AI nonprofit very recently on from one of the small experience that I had. I've been doing STEM volunteering for a long time, and I realized a lot of time people just needed a little bit of nudge, little bit of like motivational words saying that you also belong in science and technology. And then we saw like, results that people were excited and people tried to take math and science. And the same thing applies here. One of my mentors, I was talking to him and I said, hey, I probably cannot be a technical expert in this area. And then he's like, no, you have like 15, 20 years of career ahead of you. Can't you learn this? You have learned so many other things. And that little motivation that, I could be there, I could be contributing was huge. And you introduced me, Dan, saying that I have a PhD and I have this many patents, and I still require that. So we all have a responsibility to actually go back and do the same thing. It's like redoing the STEM thing all over again. And then making sure. So the key points is for the people who are ahead, and they're already, many of them are doing this very effectively, but it may apply to all of them, that they need to actually also take time to how to make other people educated enough so that they can upskill as well. And then for the students or people who are trying to be in this field, just take some time to educate yourself, elevate your skills so that your voices are strong, data-driven, and you are in a position to make a change, a right change, hopefully, right?
Well, thank you. It's really interesting to me that all three of you brought out some common themes about the pervasiveness of AI, how AI is different from some of the other technology innovation discontinuities and disruptions we've experienced over the decades. And it's affecting all business functions and all society. And given that, and Maddie, I want to put this out to you first, but I want each of you to answer it in turn. Given that it's so pervasive and with great power comes great responsibility, so the risks are magnified so much. What are you doing specifically to protect your organization in the face of all these new risks and regulations? Maddie?
Well, I would say, well, first thing I want to do is I've noticed several people raise their hands, and I just want to encourage them to write their questions in the Q&A so that James can curate them. And we'll have a written list that if we don't get to all of them, we can answer offline afterwards. So if you have a question, you have your hand raised, type your question into the Q&A so we can get to you. And then Dan, I would say both the things I do as a small business owner, as well as the things I advise my clients to do to reduce that legal debt and to mitigate the risks, are very similar. I use AI in my practice, but I use it in a very concerted way. And I use it with extreme oversight. I treat it like a high school intern that possibly an Adderall laced high school intern who wants to prove he read the assignment while not reading the assignment. So it gets a lot of scrutiny if I go through an answer from a generative AI or even a professional AI that's being sold to me. And I make sure I read it with a very critical eye, like I am a supervising attorney that is looking at the right to this. Because human oversight is not only a good idea and part of a responsible AI code that a lot of companies are putting out these days, but it's being baked into the legal requirements under the EU AI Act, under the FTC's expectation and guidance for generative AI users. You have to review what generative AI says, and you have to have it reviewed or review it by someone who's qualified to answer the same question. So, if the doctor is using generative AI or an AI tool to diagnose a patient, whatever is being spit out by that AI tool has to be reviewed by the qualified doctor, not by the hospital admin to make sure that it gave, an answer and not any answer. So you have to make sure you have that qualified human oversight. And I know, like Reddy even mentioned that, we'll have new and varied ways to communicate with customers, ways we'd never anticipated before to enter into discussions. Well, a lot of EU, well, not just the EU, but Colorado as well, and the FTC, they're saying that you can communicate through generative AI, you can use these models, but you have to tell people when they are interacting with AI or when they're interacting with a quote deep fake, a generated person. So you can't hide it. You can't hide behind this and pretend like you have an army of customer service agents when in actually you have an army of very well-trained AI bots. So there's ways to use it, but you have to be responsible for it. You have to have those governance structures in place. Reddy and Priyanka both talked about the need for governance structures. Again, that's not only becoming a legal and regulatory requirement. We've seen it in other areas. The NIST Cybersecurity Framework 2.0 now requires governance as part of cybersecurity governance. We can all read about the threat that AI poses to cybersecurity risks. So we have to have those governance structures in place for cyber. We should have them in place for AI. And as a lawyer, I love governance structures and BKMs. Good Lord, it's been a long time since I've heard those three letters strung together in a sentence. But not only have the BKMs, but write them down. As a lawyer, I love that because that's evidence that you've thought about it. Even if it's not evidence that you're perfect, it's evidence that you've considered it. You've been thoughtful about it. You have an obligation ethically or legally to do these things, and you thought enough about it to write it down. And I think right now the legal landscape is not perfection. Nobody's looking for the perfect implementation of AI governance, but they're looking for a responsible and thoughtful implementation of AI governance. So you can go a long way just with creating that thoughtfulness at whatever level your company is currently operating at. So the level of thoughtfulness the governments expect from a Microsoft or a Google or an Apple are much higher than the level of thoughtfulness expected from a two-person startup who formed last week. But you have to, if you want to get as big as the big guys, you have to start with that endpoint in mind, because that's also how you get enough access to things like capital The VCs want to see a level of governance and thoughtfulness to put their money into things like that. Otherwise, they adopt your own legal debt and your technical debt and your security debt. So, don't hamstring your own funding sources by failing to adapt to these things. So
Well,
those are the
that's
things that I look
valuable
for
advice.
internally and with my clients.
That's really valuable advice. I took a couple notes.
Not
So
legal advice, Dan.
not legal,
just
no,
my
just
thoughts.
wisdom. Yeah. So Reddy, as Chief Operating Officer of a major venture capital organization, how do you protect the interests of your organization given this huge, powerful force that's all around us?
But you need to have, as one of the tenets or the steps I called out when I was talking in the framework, you got to have the guardrails, the systems in place to protect your company. And even if you are not a huge company, having those guardrails, the safety measures is very, very important. I'll give you an example. Even if you just don't worry about the security, your training, there's a lot of inherent data that is biased. Many years ago, Amazon, as an example, they trained their AI engine on hiring. And then what happened was, inherently, especially in the technology side, it's very male dominant area, and some ethnicities are very, very underrepresented. And so what was happening was it's the data bias seeped into the engine because that's how it has seen, right? And they had to abandon that AI engine later on. And I can give you so many examples. So there are mechanisms to debias, and the training models, the models that the machine learning models you are training on, there is underfitting, overfitting, and continuously training the models. These become very, very important. You don't want to have a model that used all the training data from Saudi Arabia, and it doesn't predict a single rainy day in Portland or in Seattle, right? If you use that to predict. So you need to be really, really careful. So this is why it's very important to have your teams. This is where the difference comes. Your AI team needs to be very cross-functional. It's not sufficient if you hire a bunch of model people who can write PyTorch and build the machine learning models. You got to have infrastructure engineers. You got to have people with the business functional knowledge. You got to have ethicists, people who are going to look at the laws coming from California or Europe or Colorado, all these places. Having the cross-functional team is super important. Often when you're very small, you tend to neglect it, but there is a huge, your company's name is going to be affected if you're not careful. You don't want to be having a negative press and having the negative consequences. We all remember the FDIV very fondly many years ago, so you don't want to like that, those situations.
Excellent. Well, so Priyanka, you're leading this new not-for-profit organization, Access AI, where you're reaching out to underrepresented communities around the world. And there's got to be a lot of the same kind of legal debt sort of risk involved in that, especially as you're dealing with multiple different sets of regulations. And how do you deal with that? How do you protect your interests in the face of that?
So what I learned, right, the reason I was starting this nonprofit was to reach out to as many people where I could actually share my knowledge. As I said, teaching is the best way to learn too. So I feel that whatever I've learned, if I can actually deliver that to as many people around me and equip them, as I myself saw so many benefits of Gen AI, being able to write the code, being able to write, create. Many people told me that I could create I need to create tons of slide for curriculum. And I'm like, no, that part actually is not that tough. That part I can get a lot of material from the chatbots, really useful material. And I can get that by community building. Reddy just talked about the cross-functional teams. So I don't need to have all the expertise in me. I can actually bring together a set of volunteers who have different skill sets, and they could be actually providing all that. So there is a power in community building. I can just think right now, Reddy has written a book, AI Unleashed, right? If he can share his views in one of the sessions by the organized by the nonprofit, that itself is a session. And those will be valuable insights from somebody like Reddy. Matty can tell us a lot about the ethical and legal aspects. I can actually talk about general, the knowledge about the AI, how many types, and all those things we can already do. By doing all that, we are actually equipping people, we are actually motivating them to go and learn. By doing that, they will be actually, hopefully, will be learning it more and enough not to make such mistakes, not to oversee or overlook a data that might have caused the bias. So this is my way of indirectly actually impacting, sharing my knowledge and giving back, and then enabling everybody so that they are not doing that. That is my way of doing that currently.
Well, and one of the key enablers of that is the real qualitative difference of AI compared to other technologies, as we touched on earlier. And Reddy, I'd like you to kind of expand on that in terms of the foundational technologies that have played out over our careers, the PC revolution, the World Wide Web, and so on. How is AI different?
I'll give you a quick example. So traditionally, Dan, we are used to more structured data. It's on the software side, for example, we had known the databases forever. And we extract the data to do the analysis. But now what happens is, let's take an example of people writing about your products on G2 or some other website, YouTube, name anything, you pick your own social media. What was not possible before, but it is made possible by AI, is it's great in taking all the structured data, but it is even equally, or maybe even more, it is really great at taking all this unstructured data coming from your text messages, WhatsApp, social media, all kinds of that. Because if you miss that, as a company, all those inputs, the intelligence, the customer intelligence, you're going to miss it. But what happens is it can take all that information and give you insights. For example, if you, let's say you have a customer service organization in a company, and all the chatter that happens among the agents and all the customer intelligence, it can create the knowledge base, which is spread across 20 different systems. When I was at Autodesk, believe it or not, I had a large 400 people team that was in my organization, supporting customers and clients and 5 million customers. When they needed to access, there would be so many monitors at any given time, 10 to 15 systems they needed to have access. But now with AI, you can have all that information easily taken into consideration, and then AI chatbots can help your client, customer service agents quickly get that information. You don't need to be remembering all that, and then so it's making the lives of our employees a lot easier, and then their onboarding and training curve is extremely reduced, and then the customers are getting instantaneous or very quick responses without waiting for half a day, because it's so fast, it's very efficient, it makes the lives of the customer service experts a lot easier. So it's the scale, the personalization, and the level of efficiency it is bringing is unimaginable that we had seen.
So when you
And if
say
I
that,
could,
oh, go ahead.
sorry, Dan,
I
I
was,
was going to add to Reddy's, just because that's an excellent example of where AI can be used for extreme efficiency gains and customer satisfaction, utilizing, the customer-centric leadership that Priyanka was even talking about. And at the same time, it shows also the risks that you can get from the um, incurring legal debt, because we have the AI laws that are just coming up, but you also saw the 4 and now actually close to 8 years of data protection laws, the GDPR, the CCPA that come into place, that if you had not built a data protection program that allowed you to take all of that customer information and use it for the purpose of building and using AI, you now could have increased your legal debt by almost a 2-factor, in terms, if you want to look at just like pure financial risk, because of the additional fines and fees that are tagged on top of when you've used personal information in an AI system. Now you've doubled your legal debt. If you had not already built a robust and scalable GDPR or CCPA compliance system. So it really shows the interaction of how all of these things work together and how these are becoming far more cross-functional management and governance items that have to be taken care of.
This is excellent, right? I was just going to add to something that Reddy said too, which reminds me of if you wanted to do like 2 + 2 + 2, like 54 times, I don't know, right? Then you have a calculator. So you might just want to do it in calculator, right? Instead of spending that much time. Now you have these chatbots, right? They have like tons of data and they can give you useful insights based on the prompts or based on the information you're asking. So instead of me spending hours on reading certain papers, like 2 papers, right? 2 research papers, I can actually get a summary and key points just by putting it in some kind of chatbot. So what should I be focusing on now? The output, right? And then along what the lines that Matty said, is it making sense? Is there something wrong with the response, right? Of any data that you are doing. I'm just giving an example of research papers or that you are getting a summary and key points. So there, making sure that the result that you're getting, it makes sense. If not, then actually going back and upskilling yourself in giving the prompts. Those are the kind of skills and what insights can you actually take from this and further up level it for your executives, for wherever you are actually presenting it. Those are the skills maybe will require your time to upskill yourself. These can be used and the power of Gen AI can be harnessed very effectively to do all those work that you used to spend a lot of hours. So it has really revolutionized that way.
well, and following up on that upskilling theme, for decades we've heard about the digital divide, and it sounds to me as if AI could really widen the digital divide tremendously if we aren't proactive. And so, Priyanka, what are your thoughts on that? What are the 1 or 2 most important things that need to be done to prevent that from happening?
So I was talking about it when I was showing that triangle that was totally made up by me. But in the people who are actually going with the speed of light with innovation and research and everything, I was really thinking like, what is not happening, right? Maybe there are many who are actually giving out free content for people to train and everything. And if that was perfectly working in a perfect world, then we all would be happy, right? We all would have been upskilled already, but that's not happening. So that means more of that is needed. The second thing where they could probably integrate it in their classes or whatever, mentorship or whatever courses and training on the tools they are giving is also communicating that you need to give back too. Like you are no less, like no, don't think that you are not at that level that you cannot go and actually give this knowledge and share this knowledge with others. So empowering them and that will amplify, right? And by amplification of this, more and more people can be included on board and they could be playing a part in this.
Do you see people turning training into a business? So as you train them, they become trainers and they train other people to become trainers and it just multiplies?
I was looking at it that way, but it has also become a business, right? Just because that area is new, there is just so much demand. So there are like, a lot of training courses that I took, I had to actually pay for them. And that's why I did not want it to be a paid thing. I knew that from my 15 years, 20 years of like mentorship and volunteering in STEM experience, plus, interest in my colleagues and friends to actually go and do something. I just needed to create a platform so that we could actually go and through these connections could bring, these people who are excited. Recently, I gave a session in Kenya, and students were like middle school and high school, and they wouldn't just let me log off because they had so many questions. They just kept asking, and it was very, very fulfilling. It was a Friday night, and I was like, it was going to be 12, but I was just totally energized and happy to talk to them. And they wanted me to come back and talk about CPUs, GPUs. And one person asked me, like, what do you think, is computers IQ higher than human IQ? And I said, yes, actually, it depends on what you're training it on. So again, these are the people who we think will actually understand it well, so that those people at the top, the ideas, the vision that they have of the world on which they are doing the research and innovation can be implemented. So this part of the people are going to work on all that, right? So that's why I wanted to actually do this free of cost. It's a different kind of model. I benefit a lot by just doing that because I learn in the process. I hang out constantly with the people who are actually AI experts. They are willing to do that because they also want to give back. And then I just network with like more and more like-minded people. It's
Right.
just energy coming and going and, just re-energizing yourself.
Well, your story about the Kenyan middle school kids really brings it home, and we're going to have an audience question and answer period very shortly here as well. So before we do, one last question to put out to all of you. Ethics is something that always comes up when people talk about AI. We've talked about IP protection and legal compliance and so on, but what about ethics? Reddy, what are your thoughts?
This is, technology by its nature is neutral, right? Uh, how you use it is very, very important. I'll give you a couple of examples. One was a case in Michigan. AI-driven technology misidentified this gentleman. This happened only less than 5 years ago, and he was arrested, and it found out that he was not the right one. There was a mismatch with his driver's license with the theft. And anyway, that's the bad part, how you can use the technology the wrong way. It was unintended consequence. So when it comes to the ethics, anything that involves human beings, loan applications, healthcare decisions, employment, these are, you need to be extremely, extremely careful. And my thinking, and which I put it in the book, is you need to have human oversight, because it's technology. You can bring the LLM that is trained on 27 trillion tokens, which someone was talking about 2 days ago on Twitter. But the thing is, that's not going to change the ethics and the reasoning, these things that are human side. So that's very, very important. This is why transparency and explainability of AI is extremely important. When you are denying someone's loan application, you don't know how that LLM or your machine learning model had come to that decision. And don't put it, hey, my AI engine told me to deny it. That's unethical, and it's not good for ethically. It looks really terrible. So you need to have, by the way, it is very, very possible, I know the companies are doing it, you can actually, what are all the factors with the correlations built in that says, hey, in this AI, in this loan application acceptance or reject, these are the factors that were considered. And then so the officer granting or accepting that loan, he can say, or she can say, oh, this doesn't make any sense. Just because someone wrote a comment on Twitter or something, you take that into consideration. Oh, it doesn't make any sense, so I'm going to override that. So that level of transparency is
And not
important.
just override ready, but correct.
Yeah, correct.
How do
Yeah.
you feed it back to the people who develop the tool so that that same mistake doesn't happen twice?
Right, exactly. This is where the model training, the data, removing the biases, and how do you apply AI, having the human in the loop, at least I strongly believe that that's super, super important.
Great. Well, look, we have some great questions from the audience, and I think why don't we transition to that? And I'm going to throw these out to the whole panel, and you guys just jump in, when you feel like you're the best one to answer. So this comes from someone who worked at Intel for many, many years, worked for Pat Gelsinger in the 90s, and drove the inception of several implementation forums like USB and things like that. And the question is, underwriters laboratories and implementer forums are examples of organizations that are separate from government that both set standards and also define compliance tests and employ ways to simplify the assurance for customers. So is there anything like that for AI?
And Dan, can I step in here too? Because not only did I recently represent one of the largest assurance and certification companies in the world in their digital transformation, but I am very familiar with a lot of the standards going on in the standard development here. And ISO itself is developing a responsible AI standard. I expect to see a lot of industry participation, particularly among the mega players. I think there was another question about will these mega players consolidate for AI platforms? I think they're mostly going to do that through the standard setting organizations where they get in less trouble for antitrust and anti-competitive behaviors by helping set those standards. In addition to that, the EU AI Act established a new EU regulatory body that is tasked with specifically coming up with responsible AI standards and certification schemas. The EU AI Act itself will require that high-risk AI systems, as defined in the Act, be certified in order to be sold in the EU, and that certification requirement will come into effect, I believe, in 18 months from April. So it'll be late 2025, 2026. Check the timeline slide that I set out, it's in there. And so we are seeing standard setting bodies come together to try to figure out what does responsible AI development and sale look like. A lot of it, though, there's standards and standard control sets similar that you'd see in like an ISO 27001 or some of the cybersecurity standards. So there's a lot of ways that companies will have flexibility on how they implement those controls. But we are seeing a lot of action right now in those standard setting organizations. And at some point in the somewhat near future in Europe, you'll be required to have a stamp similar to like a CE mark to sell high risk AI systems in Europe.
That's a pretty definitive answer. Does anyone else want to try to add to that, or I'll go to the next question then? Next question, how good is generative AI at spotting outliers from data? And let me just make a comment about that. At the Fusion Syndicate, we do prompt engineering and have created a number of GPTs for a number of things. And we have some that do this very thing, that analyze documents and find patterns and insights and outliers. And sometimes if you just do it by going directly into something like ChatGPT, it doesn't always work out. You might get hallucinations or inaccuracies. So it's very important to use tools that are engineered to try to avoid those problems. And we're not the only ones trying to do that. Many people offer solutions to do that. And generative AI does that very well as long as it's got human insight and oversight to drive it and to review it. But Reddy, you talked a lot about human oversight. Maybe you want to amplify that.
Yeah, one is having that human oversight is very, very important, as probably you might have seen how the LLMs, whether it was ChatGPT 3.5 or Claude, any of them, they evolved. And if you look at the benchmarks, they're great at summarizing, and then all of a sudden you give 2 + 2, it says it's 5, right? It's a mathematical or a simple arithmetic. It doesn't have that sense. So can it identify outliers? Absolutely, it does. Again, they're depending on how the regs are inherently used. And then the second thing is your prompt that Dan, you were talking about. Your prompt also needs to be, there are ways you can write the prompt. You can lead it to give the step-by-step instructions. It's almost like in writing code, and then if then else, or do this like a big function. It is like that. If you can write a meaningful prompt and are using multiple agents, which you can create on any pro account, chat GPT 4.0, or you can create them, then you can get the outliers, but always have that human oversight. I had seen so many of these examples. It's in, probably Maddie knows this more closely than anyone else. Some a lawyer submitted a bunch of cases that didn't exist, and then he was reprimanded by the judge.
Yes, almost lost his bar license and
Yeah,
had to
exactly.
practice
So
over
that
it.
could, yeah. But by the way, I want to commend what Priyanka is doing with her nonprofit. It's I took neural networks class 30 plus years ago, and in 2017, the machine learning as we know today, it was not even it existed as a thought, but no one thought it was a reality. And then in 2017, I was taking a class that Andrew Yang was teaching online for free, and man, it was completely different. So what I'm saying is you can learn these things, whether you have computer science degree or music, doesn't matter. You can learn, and the prompt engineering is not hard. So I want to get that word out.
It
Yeah,
has a
no,
lot of
adding to,
value, though.
yeah, adding to what Reddy was saying, actually, I was thinking the same, that many of these things, like, the statistics, everything existed before, right? Now, what you can actually do is, with the power of Gen AI, you can get better insights. You can put much more data and get much more insights in a summarized way. And that is where you are adding a value as a human to actually interpret it better, because now instead of like 2 + 2 like 5 times, you can do it like 10,000 times and just get out like, a useful insight, and just say something very valuable and move from there. So everybody goes to this level, and then from there is what, they need to expand and think of like more ways. I used actually the chat GPT, this GPT chatbot from Fusion Syndicate to write one of the grant proposal for my nonprofit. And whatever I had written, right, I sent it, and it was also from one of those chatbots. But then it actually highlighted, you are missing this, this does not seem to be doable, expand on this. It was very good, because when you are writing it, it has to be, when somebody is going to give you money, then you have to make sure, they will have to make sure that it is actually doable. So it actually pointed out a lot of things like that. But then as you educate yourself more and more on these things like Llama 3, right? 7 billion, 8 billion parameter model that can be run on your computer. And you can try so many of these. Gemini, something is very good for code writing versus something is really good for like, summarizing. Something is very good for grant writing. And then see which one suits you the best. So that is where the human insight, where your inputs are coming into picture. What do you actually need, right? Spending time on that. So learning this will require a little bit of time, right? Just make sure that you learn that. But then once you have that, you are able to actually find out what is the best tool for me to get ahead and much faster, more impact.
And I would even say, as Priyanka said before, that with great power comes great responsibility. Talking to that phrase came up exactly yesterday too on somebody else, where they said, "Oh, that sounds almost biblical," and I'm like, "Well, if Stan Lee wrote your Bible, you're in good shape." But it does. These are really powerful tools, but they do create great responsibility and, under the law, great accountability. And it's the humans who are accountable for how they use these LLMs and these generative AIs, and not the machines themselves. As Reddy said, there's a lawyer who decided to believe made up case law when he should have been able to check it and almost lost his license. There's the police departments who have relied on this, one of the few things of generative AI and AI tools that I find truly terrifying, something called Clearview AI. It's absolutely terrifying, and it's restricted to use for law enforcement. And right now, the law does not have a lot of accountability built in for law enforcement who misuses this. And that particular piece of AI will be actually banned under the EU AI Act. The EU government found it terrifying enough that they outright banned it on like 3 different pillars of how it operates. So, that's kind of the balance that governments are taking, like who to hold accountable. And if you can't hold anybody accountable for it, should it exist?
Cool. So I want to shift gears to another line of questioning. One of the top executives of our industry has asked a series of 3 interrelated questions. He says people and companies will have to make a choice about where to get their AI tools. How do we see industry alliances forming among AI players to provide AI technology? He says players today are Microsoft, Google, Meta, Amazon, Tesla, NVIDIA, Intel, AMD, and so on. How many platforms will emerge? What alliances do we envision behind each platform? And so I want to just say one thing. I think that what Microsoft did to IBM 30, 35 years ago is going to be done to Microsoft. And I don't know who's going to do it. Maybe OpenAI, although Microsoft owns half of them. But the idea that we have a disruptive technology that empowers people from the bottom up, that you can just use if you have a smartphone and free ChatGPT and do amazing things. And then there's this other model where you have to go through all this IT plumbing to get it to work. Which one's going to win? It's obvious to me. So that's my 2 cents. Let me throw it out to the panel.
Just remember that the IT plumbing is owned by Microsoft, Google, Apple. So there is, and full disclosure, Microsoft's a former client of mine.
Fair enough.
While I tend to be very positive, Dan, I am a little bit on the fence with your statement that, hey, it's going to be so disruptive that the Microsofts and NVIDIAs would be completely disrupted. Here is why. When you look at all these training models, these big ones, they require large sums of investments that a startup cannot get that, because it's every query that you and I just put into ChatGPT or Claude, it costs almost 4 or 5 cents, and it's a lot of money for them. And it's while I'm not digging against NVIDIA, but they're not very efficient GPUs. They're very happy selling the GPUs, but they're inefficient and power hungry. That's why the demand is through the roof, right? And who is able to afford that? It's the Microsoft, it's the Googles, and all these big companies. That's where my being on the fence comes. However, there are open source models that are becoming at least close. For example, Llama, this is Llama 3 is very capable, and their Mixtral, their models are very competitive. There are, if you go to Hugging Face, there are lots of these open source models.
But isn't Llama 3 owned by Meta?
What's
It's
that?
open source, but
It is
Meta
open source,
created
but
it.
it's owned by Meta.
It is,
there's still somebody behind it that has to pay for the power consumption, that has to build out the data centers, that has to run the GPUs, that has to fund the capital.
No, but what I'm saying is, yeah, that is there are a lot of open source models available that are getting very close. So you don't need to, if you don't like Facebook or Meta, you can go with the Mistral. It's very efficient, and there are other open source models on Hugging Face. they're very competitive. So there is
Yeah.
hope, but we will see. It's a different ball game than it was in other arenas, other waves. That's why I'm a little bit unsure where this will be headed.
It's interesting because Microsoft has just put out an open source large language model. Amazon has done so. Meta has done so. Google has done so. And yet they are, to Maddie's point, the big powers behind the scenes and not always behind the scenes. So what does that mean for the open source movement?
Well, I think a lot of open source folks can build on those platforms as well. They still have the democratization of cloud computing offered by those companies that they can build. Now, you still have to pay for compute and power, which could be cost effective. But in terms of consolidation, the biggest thing I see is an acquisition strategy by those big guys to suck up the ones that are most successful, or an integration play where they want to make sure they all work together so people can create hybrid models.
I agree
Yeah,
actually to
well,
Matt's
I'll
point.
just one quick one, Priyanka.
Sure, sure.
So I'll give you an example where even if the open source comes from someone like Meta, it helps the overall community. Way back in 2012, 13 timeframe, I don't remember exactly, PyTorch was a Meta released machine learning model, and we used it actually in 2019. My team used it to build an export compliance AI application that automated 50 million account screening. And it was completely open source, and Google had its own version. So we all benefit from that, even if it comes from an established company. And once the model, you take it and deploy it, you're not consuming their resources or anything like that.
Agree. Yeah.
Sorry, Priyanka, go ahead.
Oh,
Go
no, I was just agreeing to Mattie's point, what she was talking about open source. But I think a lot of innovations happen as a result of big breakthroughs that happen. Where is that breakthrough happening? Is it happening in a format like, open source, where everybody has affordability, also the ease of use, accessibility, right? Versus in some other, like, more proprietary kind of solution. So it really depends on that breakthrough where it happens. And as a result of that breakthrough, a lot of innovations happen.
Great. Well, one last question before we wrap up. Do we see an AI standard such as CE marking being adopted worldwide, a single standard?
Well, even CE is not a single standard worldwide, but I think if the CE mark is any indication, or GDPR, you'll see the rest of the world glom on to the European standard. There's even a book written about it called The Brussels Effect. Europe is really looking to lead the world in this type of regulation. They view themselves as very successful with GDPR. And so I think they're going for the same thing with the AI route to drive a semi-global standard. It'll never be truly global just because of the difference between basically Western and Eastern approaches, not Eastern. European and China and Russia are taking different approaches to regulation of this type of technology.
Great. Well, James, I think we're right on time to hand it back to you for
Great.
closing remarks. Thank you.
Yeah, hey guys, thank you very much. Thanks Dan for doing this today and gathering these very insightful panelists together. This was a fascinating and insightful discussion to have over lunchtime. Many thanks to the panelists for taking time out of their busy schedule, share their thoughts and insights around AI. Also, for those interested in learning more about AI, please consider following the Fusion Syndicate's LinkedIn page with a new post every week. I subscribe to it and I read it diligently. Dan Feinberg and Michael Zuthan publish that weekly. I believe there are around 50 posts right now, if I'm correct, Dan. And Michael, you should have copied and pasted the link to that into the chat window for those folks who would like to go to that. Also, I want to give a shout out to two amazing Intel alums, Michael Zuthan and Mike Trainer, for producing today's event, and to Max Torres and Kimberly Sumija from Intel for promoting this inside of Intel itself. If you liked what you saw today, one last plea or request, and I'm cajoling you for this, please consider contributing, whatever you can. to the Intel Alumni Network. Producing these events really don't cost all that much, but they do cost some money. And we're continuing to work to really upgrade our content, our moderators and our panelists. We're getting real thought leaders, people who have genuine experience in the areas and the topics that we focus on. So Michael, if you could copy and paste that donate now button or URL into the chat window, I would appreciate it. And also, please, everyone note that if you want to review this event or you want to share it, even better, share it with friends. It will be up on the intelalumni.org website within the week. And so with that, I want to wish everyone a great day. Have a great afternoon. And note that we will be producing another AI event here as we have committed to every quarter going forward. So thanks, everybody. This was a lot of fun. Thank you to everybody for
Thanks, James.
contributing the time.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
guys.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.